Or do you remember the moment that sprung board Racer X into Mr. Big, or your career from one to the next?
Well, Racer X had, back then the big thing was to get a major record deal. And we were, we were doing well on our indie label, but there was a real limit to what, our career, where it could go on an indie record label. So that was the whole thing. Like, can we get signed? That was the goal back then, and we couldn't. Every label came to see us. It wasn't that they didn't know who we were. We were selling out the biggest clubs in LA. All the people from every record label would come down, watch us, and they'd all say, we don't think so, no. And it was really disheartening. At the same time, we really believed in the band and believed in the music, but after a while, we're like, man, we're just stuck. We can't seem to get this moving anywhere. And right around that time was when Billy Sheehan called me up, and I had already been a huge fan of Billy's from seeing him in the band Talus. They used to play in Pittsburgh a lot, near where I grew up. And so I was, he was, at that time, if I had to list my top, 5 guitar heroes, Billy, even though he's a bass player, he would have been in that list. He was hugely influential to me as a musician, just watching how he played. So for him to, for my phone to ring and Billy to be on the other end was like, oh my God, it's Billy Jean. And we had we had met briefly a few times. First of all, for me just showing up at the concerts and hanging out, being a fan. Second of all, opening up for, I got a gig opening up for Talus and my cover band back in Pennsylvania. And then when he moved to LA to play with David Lee Roth, at that same time, Racer X started, and those guys used to come see us. We'd get all excited. We'd be about to do a Racer X show and be like, "Hey, the Roth guys are here. Billy and Steve and Dave, they're all out there." So Billy was definitely aware of me, and I was aware of him. And he also used to come to do clinics at BIT, and so he'd be walking down the hall to go to the clinic, and he'd see me in a room, and he'd stop in, and we'd jam some Accept songs. So I think that the thing that sort of got me the gig with Billy was the fact that I knew so many songs, and even though he was older, we really connected on that musical level. That's the language we speak. It's funny. Once in a while, I'll get a student that's good at sight reading, and it's like, man, that's a different way. There's probably, for studio musicians or for classical musicians, that's like how you communicate. But for most rock musicians, you communicate with cover songs. Yeah. You go like, hey, it's that lick from Heartbreaker, or it's that chord from that chord from that Beatles song, or it's all these
referring to this common knowledge of music that you've learned or listened to.
That's our college. That's our school that we grew up in.
Yeah, and so I kind of, that was my end with Billy. Is any song Billy would name? He'd, oh, I know that, because I'd always played with older musicians and had learned. I learned my parents' record collection, so that was the connection. And then Billy told me he was forming a band, and I joined.